Hello, I'm Karen Blythe, Controller Consultant at HAYNE Solutions, and today I'll be showing you a demo of IBM Controller Web on version 11.1, which was released in November 24. New features for this release are a name change to IBM Controller, an updated design and layout, more quick launch options, self-service database admin, controller API, and copy opening balances, and I'll cover each of these as we go through the demo. First of all, the name change. IBM have dropped the word Cognos from the product name, and it is now simply known as IBM Controller. The main reason for this was to avoid confusion between Cognos Analytics and Controller, both within IBM and with customers. Secondly, we have an updated design. You'll see from the login screen that the whole look and feel of Controller Web is now a bit different. IBM have redesigned it to align more with other Cognos products such as Planning Analytics and Cognos Analytics. The first screen I come to now focuses on upcoming deadlines. These are based on the dates entered for each submission in the Classic client. Deadlines are marked with a dot on the calendar, and if I click on a date with a deadline, it brings up the relevant submission so that I can go straight into it. The next few deadlines are also shown in the middle here, and I can click View All to see others. Open Projects, which was the first screen in the previous version, is now over to the right-hand side, and as before, the projects that are visible here are managed by period locking in the Classic client. If I click View All here, this takes me to the project screen that you would have seen in the previous version. At the bottom of the screen, there is a recently updated section, which brings up the last 3 submissions I've edited. And over to the right-hand side, there are a few quick launch options, which take you to status and logs for consolidations and import logs, administration for those admin functions that can be managed through Controller Web, settings which allow you to manage your own filters on companies and groups, and a link to IBM documentation. Going into the administration menu, this latest version gives us a couple of new options. Database administration, which allows you to take backups and restore databases. Obviously this is subject to security access, and it's also a cloud-specific feature. And Controller API, which is a more secure alternative to the staging tables used when importing data from other systems automatically. The FAP and file size limit options here were added in the previous release. FAP allows you to run your structure update and initial publish to FAP. And file size limit allows you to set limits on the file size for journal and data imports and for journal attachments. Going back to the main screen, there is also a personal menu at the top, which allows you to download the Controller Classic client and the Excel link if local IT permissions allow. And in settings, you can choose things like language settings and date and number format. So first of all, let's go into 2406, which is a completed period. I've left the total lock off in the Classic client so that we can still see this in web. If I just go into the Classic client and lock this period, you'll see that when I go back into Controller Web, that period no longer appears in my open projects. I'll now go into 2407, which is an open period. You'll see we have the same company structure page as before, but the filters have now moved to the left-hand side. I can filter by status to show just those that are missing or ready, for example. I can change my view to other company structures, or just a list of all companies without the structure. And I can search to find a specific company. This view does honour existing company security, so users will only see the companies they have access to, which is managed in the Classic client. The project summary button at the top right gives us a graphical representation of the submission status in either numeric or percentage terms. As before, the Details tab gives a breakdown of the submission status by form for each company, allowing us to see exactly where each one is in the submission process. For those companies that are ready, you can see that the lock status of those companies is locked, whereas all other companies are currently unlocked. Next to each company, there is an action menu. For a company, I can go straight to import data, import journals, lock the company, etc. as before. The copy opening balances function here is one of the new features with this release. This was something that a lot of users had asked for, as it was one of the few remaining functions needed to enable a reporting site user to use only Controller Web and not have to use the classic client. All I have to do is select the company and copy opening balances. Click Continue, and you'll see that I get a notification in the top right that my opening balances have been copied. Alternatively, for an administrator, if I select multiple companies, I have the option to copy opening balances for several companies all at once. Also, from the action menu, I can view more details on a particular company. The information shown here is what has been entered in the classic client. So let's now go through the process of completing a month-end submission for one company, using UK Holdco as an example. We'll go to the company workflow, which brings up several tabs as before. There is a Populate tab to import and populate data. There's an Intercompany tab to check the intercompany balances. There's a Journals tab to enter or import journals, including attachments. There's a Reconciliation tab, which shows the results of the standard controller reconciliations. There's a Review tab, where you can run predefined reports or write your own. And finally, there is a Summary tab. The Submit button on here is currently greyed out, as I have missing forms and I have reconciliation issues. You'll now notice that the Submit button is available from whichever tab I'm currently using, so I don't have to go to the final summary when I'm ready to submit. I'll now start working through the workflow and close off this submission for this company. On the Populate tab, I have two forms missing, which are my P&L and balance sheet. The rest have been populated manually already, so I now need to import my TB. This is standard functionality in Controller Web to import a file, either Excel or CSV, using an import specification and lookup tables. The import specs are slightly less functional than in the classic client, but they do have the advantage of being a lot easier for users to write their own import specs, which will map columns from an Excel spreadsheet to controller fields. So I'll select Import Data at the bottom here. The import settings, where you define the import specification and lookup tables, have now moved to their own section up in the top right-hand corner. I'll then click to add the file I want to load, select my import spec, and click Next. You'll see that this has brought up a mapping error. What I can do in Controller Web is to update the mapping on the fly. If I save that, I now have no mapping errors on this import. It has changed my mapping both for this import and future imports, and importantly, it has allowed me to continue with this import without having to start over again. Then I click on Next to get a summary of what I'm importing, and finally click on Import to load the data. This takes me back to the Populate tab, and we get a message at the top of the screen to say that the file is importing, and another when it's finished. At this point, you'll see the P&L and balance sheet forms have changed from missing to reported automatically, without me having to refresh the page. Now I have some reconciliation issues to deal with. My debit-credit reconciliation has a £50,000 difference, so I need to find this somewhere. Between accounts has the same difference, as the cash flow is not agreeing because I have a TB imbalance. And opening balances all agree, as I had previously copied them. Now let's take a look at the Intercompany tab.
This shows we have 8 intercompany balances that don't agree.
On this one, the counterparty has a different value to me, although in this case I know it's me that's wrong and I need to correct that. This will hopefully also fix the £50,000 reconciliation difference. From here I can go directly to a form that contains this account to amend my value. I'll go to the P&L form, find the account and change the entry to 700,000. I can also add a comment here and apply my changes, save my data and close the form.
We can now see that the number of intercompany differences has reduced to 7.
And the flag that was there earlier on the reconciliation tab has now disappeared. It's dynamic, so as we change data, the reconciliation will change automatically. So it's much quicker and easier for the user than running the reconciliation reports in the classic client. If I go into the reconciliation tab, my debit credit and my between accounts reconciliations now agree. Just a note on the Intercompany tab, the differences here are flagged yellow, not red. They won't stop you being able to submit. For example, if the counterparty has not yet submitted their data, this will show up as a difference, but it shouldn't stop you submitting your data. You'll see that the Submit button is now available, as I've completed my missing forms by uploading my TB, and there are no reconciliation differences. But I'm not quite ready to submit just yet, as I want to look at the journals. If I click on the plus button next to a journal type, I can add a new journal and enter a description and my debits and credits as usual. Or I can now upload a journal using an import spec, similar to how we loaded the TB data. The file doesn't need to be in any specific format, it can be a normal Excel or CSV file. So I select my file, select my import spec and click Next. There are no errors, so I can continue with my import. If I now go into that journal, I can attach a file. Attachments can be Word, Excel, PDF, etc. And a file size limit for attachments can be set in the administration menu. I can delete the attachment from here as well. You can only open the attachment once you've posted the journal, and you can also edit the journal once you've uploaded it and post again. Also within journals, I can search for words, accounts, journal numbers, etc. So some very useful search tools here. Also new in this version is that entries posted to statistical accounts now appear in italics, which helps to distinguish them from the TB accounts. I now want to do a review. There are 2 review tools offered in Controller Web. First of all, I can use my forms in the Populate tab. I can go to any form and there are various filters available. The filters are now split into 2 sections. One is related to the columns, where I can filter to show cells with or without values. The other is related to the full grid, where I can filter to show, for example, just input accounts or just summation accounts. I can even filter to show intercompany accounts, which actually removes the need to have a separate intercompany form. I can search for a particular account by account code or by name. I can even export my forms to Excel. So again, some very useful tools here for reviewing the data. The second review option is the Review tab itself. From here I can run reports very quickly, for example showing a balance sheet or P&L for this period with comparatives to the year end and forecast period. These can also be exported to Excel. The reports here are all written by users, and there is the option to make your reports private so that only you can see them, or public, which all users can see. And the ability to write public reports is managed through security rights in the classic client. So now I've completed my tasks for this company and I'm ready to submit. I can go to the Summary tab, which gives me an overview of the submission, and I can now press the Submit button. This sets my company status to ready and locks it. I can then choose whether to go back to the overview screen or the projects screen or the next submission if there's more than one. If I choose overview, then you can see that my UK Holdco company is now at status ready and the data is locked. If I go back into the workflow, I can see all the same data, but if I try changing numbers on the P&L form, for example, I get a locked warning. Anyone with the appropriate rights can unlock the company from the overview, which then puts the status back to reconciled. From the overview screen, I can now run a consolidation for a group. All of the settings here are pre-filled. All you need to do is press run to start the consolidation. It uses the context of the current period that we're in without us having to tell it what to consolidate. So again, it's much easier than in the classic client. When I run a consolidation, I can see the progress in the bar at the top of the screen. If I click into this, it takes me to the batch queue so I can see when my consolidation has finished. Going back to the first screen, I can now see the summary of the latest submission I've been working in, and I can go directly to the relevant tab for that company from that submission. It will actually show the last 3 submissions I've worked on here. So there we have IBM Controller Web version 11.1. The design and layout is a bit different, but the functionality is much the same as the last version, with a few highly requested improvements, such as the ability to copy opening balances. In future releases, we hope to see more of the group consolidation functionality made available in Controller Web. As before, there is no real change in the classic client in this version, other than menu options under User Rights and Security to manage access within Controller Web. IBM's main focus for development in future releases will be on Controller Web. That's all from me. Thank you for your time, and please reach out to us here at HAYNE if you have any questions.